Welcome to Synced on Air. I'm your host, Angelique Robb, and today I have a special guest with me, Mar Ricketts. He's the founder and design principal at GuildWorks. Welcome, Mar. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing super well. Glad to
Great.
be on with you.
Thanks. Yes, I've met Olivia with GuildWorks at ASLA, and now I get to meet you. But I love the work that you guys are doing and thought maybe you could tell us how you got here with GuildWorks. A brief overview.
Yeah, it's been a wandering path. And my background's in architecture. That's what I went to my degree school for. And inside of that, I really specialized in fabric structures and tension structures, but especially in the greater world of morphology, geometry, which set
Okay.
me up to understand tensile structures really well. And
Yeah.
then kind of minored in some of that tensile engineering and understanding. So that was this breadth of knowledge I came out of that
So
schooling
did you
with.
always know that this is what you wanted to do?
Uh, no, I wanted to do architecture going into school.
Okay.
I had an idea of, contemporary architecture, I think at the time. But once I worked on these structures around midway through my schooling, it was like, oh, I really want this is of interest. Fabric structures use minimal materials, so they're efficient, they're lightweight, and yet most of the built environment, if we look at it, is using a third to two-thirds of the world's natural resources. So here's a way that we can reduce our carbon footprint. Even at that time, that seemed critical to me. And they're beautiful in the form, and the structure is the form. The form is the structure, not like you're trying to do something behind the scenes. So all of that
It's
appealed.
sculptural.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool.
It's
Okay.
sculptural and it's physical. It's both at the same time. So
Awesome. And so what is GuildWorks and when did you start GuildWorks?
GuildWorks is a design build firm that does design, engineering, fabrication, and installation of tension
Fantastic.
fabric structures, membrane and other structures. And I founded it and it's gone through lots of changes, but maybe it's more like now what I was thinking I wanted to get to. So there's kind of like that road, you
It's a
take, well,
journey.
what's the opportunities here? You go from there.
So how did it start then?
It started with a design build project
Okay.
with a group of students. So this was in my fourth year, and the name was formed because we were doing a design build project for a store in New York City and working on that. And it was the idea that the guild has separated talents and backgrounds to come together, but it works like a guild, an artisan guild. So here we have this sense of craft and skill and understanding. And how do we relay that when we're doing something new? So to choose this old word and say, well, that's the work of the guild, guild works, and form that one word out of it is
Because
kind
it
of the
takes a lot of
principle.
specialties,
Takes a lot of
imagine.
specialties, a lot of details, a lot of different directions of view.
Awesome. I think especially now when you have, you look on, let's say, Amazon and you see shade sales and, you know, how do your, because it's a fabric tensile structure and some people could get confused that it's a, $100 fabric shade sale versus what you do, which is a lot more
Right.
expensive, permanent quality. Explain some of the differences.
Yeah, well, let's start with the fabric. People think it's fabric and, oh, it's just going to blow in the wind
Flat.
around, right?
Yeah.
How's it going to hold up to the wind load? And how's it going to do this stuff? For us, and the way we're working, this is a modern fabric structure, and we have to build it and engineer it and build it to meet codes, just as if we were building a permanent building to be there. And whether it's wind or rain or snow load, we have to consider all of those points of view. in in that and in the calculations and the strength of materials. And these fabrics are very long lasting. Now, there's a variety of fabrics we might choose from. Some might be like, oh, we want to consider replacement in 15 years. But a lot of what we try to put up is fabrics that we expect to last 30, 35 years, and even 50 years or more before just the membrane itself, the fabric itself, needs replacement.
Okay.
And the support structure, I mean, we're using stainless steel cables, we're using steel poles, there, foundations anchoring this on the ground. All of that is a 50 to 100-year structure, just as in, or more, just like any sort of commercial architectural application. So there's a very much a big difference between the quick shade, uh, going to Amazon or something like that, or even the quick shade that we might put up for an event, or I might put up in my backyard when it's like, oh, it's a hot day, I'm having everybody over, I'm going to put a quick shade up. Now that's coming from our inventory because we used to do events and it's very different to do, but it's still not, there's a difference to most of our work that I'll be showing you today and talking about, and how fabric architecture can make big impacts to, our surroundings, our landscape that we live with.
And I really like that you pointed out that you can get shade, with less resources, less natural resources. Because if, you know, I want to compare, obviously, I'm in South Louisiana. So we want to optimize shade everywhere. You want to, even when you park in a parking lot, you look for a tree that might be growing over, a parking spot. Trees take a really long time to mature. So if you're going to plant a tree, you have to have enough soil, you won't get shade instantly. I think what's unique about your products is that you can get that shade instantly, and it's not a huge construction. And maybe I don't want to
And
belittle it, but it's light on the space. It's light on materials, but it can make a huge impact. I think that's really important to as an option, like not every project will be right for your tensile structures, but it gives you another tool for a project to give you
right.
instant shade.
And there's a nice mix between fabric structure and shade. So it's not one's
Yeah.
exclusive of another. We can plant shade trees in and around or and let them grow more, but you can have immediate relief from shade, from weather protection of any sort by building a fabric structure. And that install time, that on-site construction time, is really small. They're largely prefabricated. So it's prefabricated technology that can be controlled more, in a shop setting, from coming from CAD and getting it built to those exacting need measurements and details, and installed relatively quickly on site. So that
Yeah.
site time frame, which is an expensive piece, but also a disturbing piece. Like, you have construction going on
Yeah.
here that's, you know, not the enjoyable time for the site. It
Messy.
makes for
The,
the enjoyable
yeah,
time, but
I know.
it's not that. But yeah, the difference, I want to step back to that difference. There's different, these huge levels of differentiating work in almost any field of architecture. Like, we can have the little shack built in the woods that's not permitted, and might be quaint, but might not hold up to the big storm. But most structures that have gone through that kind of rigorous study will. And I think what's even interesting in our world is there's a variety of work happening where there's the Amazon shade and someone just does it, and then there's also other shade that's being done and not even understood by engineers or developers, etc., what they're doing out there with that shade and specifying it or putting up, because it seems like it doesn't take that much load, or it's not going to take that much load. And contemporary engineering or standard engineering doesn't even calculate for the loads on a membrane structure. So you have to go through special software and special understandings to get those loads. So this is
Well, and
all
so
part of it.
yeah, there's a lot to it. And hearing that yeah, you're calculating for snow loads and wind loads. Are there any areas that you can't do a solution for, develop a solution for? Like, I'm thinking of hurricanes, I'm thinking of, heavy snow areas. Are there any areas that you can't work in?
No, there's
No.
not really.
Okay.
There's limitations or trickiness with working. So if we have a
Okay.
really heavy snow load, it's going to be like someone's going out there and placing all these trucks on top of your fabric structure.
Try.
Like essentially the weight's about the same, like if you pulled
Yeah.
up a lot and packed it tight with, heavy
And
vehicles,
you
and
melt it
imagine
and then
that's floating on the roof of your structure. That's what that snow weight can be when you get up into the mountains. Um, is it maybe the most reasonable choice then? Maybe, maybe not. But you could
okay.
also there's some solutions. One solution done by another fabric structure engineering firm that I love, where they took the tensile form, but they just alternated the materials so they were able to build lighter. So, that's
Okay.
but get more, stiffness and rigidity into the roof. So there's these methods have a lot of options.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good to know. And what I'm hearing is that what GuildWorks does is it takes all of the complications around, so somebody comes to you with a project and says, I would love to have some of your tensile structures, but I'm not really sure where or how. You figure that all out. You propose
Right.
solutions based on the weather, based on the structures. Is that right? Or do
And
people
based on
normally
the landscape and the architecture, how does it fit in? Because it can be awkwardly designed and you can have poles where you don't want them and think
Okay.
you need it there, or you can really look at that working with the flow of the surroundings that are either designed or getting designed, and laid out and say, well, let's try to bring those down into, more landscape sections and the walkway sections, are going around it. And how do we
So
make
it's
that flow
iterative.
work?
One of
Yeah,
the
it's another iterative
like
design
everything.
process, but you have that flexibility once you understand how to work with the design solutions of tensile structures. There's kind of infinite variety of flexibility, but some real structural requirements on those, right? So
Mhm.
it's that
Yeah.
balance.
Okay. Well, I think it's neat. I mean, I was doing a lot of landscape design work up in Scotland for a while, and now I'm back in South Louisiana. Um, I see a lot of, like A-frame pavilions, which I find really stifling hot, and it makes me think of your sails in that there's also this heat trapping under roofs,
That's
that
right.
you would never get with, or would you, with your shade structure. So I see this as a, a lot of people don't understand that those A-frame pavilions hold so much heat. I mean, I think that this is a good solution to combating that. What do you
Right.
say on that? Yeah.
The I mean, the heat island, one is just keeping back the heat island effect. If you have
Mhm.
an open grounds, and especially if there's some massive concrete or anything like that, it's just going to heat up during the day, and the heat index
Radiate.
kind of in that spot in the late afternoon can get really unbearable, right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to have it be somewhere people are coming in the early evening, but it's been heating up all day, things like that, right? So
Yeah.
to have some way to cut down that heat island, it's extraordinary effect without really having a full roof or walls or any of that. You can be 10 degrees easier, 15 degrees difference of the temperature underneath the structure. And yeah, the ability that heat's not getting trapped if we're using multiple panels slightly overlapped and arranged, then that heat's not getting trapped. It also means the wind load's not getting trapped. So even when we're loading it, that wind is flowing through there versus hitting the structure as one mass. Yeah.
Okay. Gosh. Well, let's see some projects. Let's talk us through some of your projects if you don't mind sharing. And we'll go through some of the details.
We will. See that?
Oh, wow. Yes.
This
Heck
is one
yeah.
of our most recent ones. This is Providence and City Center, and it's right downtown Providence. Um, this is where the City Hall, mayor's office, he looks out here. And this is an ice rink that's been known and loved for years by members of the city, people who live there and go out and skate in the middle of the winter. They have two problems is that it's actually getting so much warmer and they're getting melted ice. And so, how do you shade the ice from the sun
Wow.
exposure? So, creating shade in the middle of the winter, you just don't think about this.
I was gonna say, why are we talking about ice rings? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
funny.
it's actually producing shade in the winter to help the ice stay cooler, have
Cooler.
less solar gain. And then in the summer, the same thing. They like to rent it for
Mm.
events, but they had a very narrow season. So you can see here, they set up, not long after we built for an event and just had a smaller summertime event underneath this shade structure that's sitting there. And it's, one of the things we do often is these situations where the span is a larger span and we're trying to do it without, steel post in the middle of the span. We don't want a post here. We don't want big beams across the span, things like that.
Yeah, and so in this structure, you only have four posts in the ground, or yeah, four
Oh,
contact
well,
points,
yeah,
or
we
are there
have
more?
four primary, and each of those come down to two anchors, some of
Okay,
which are post. And I don't know that we have a good picture here
that's
to
okay.
see it, but
But
we
that's
can maybe.
important that you don't have lots of posts interrupting the flow of
That's
whatever's
right.
underneath. So, yeah, no, that is fantastic. I
You
mean,
can see some of the cables coming down. So we're
yeah.
looking, here's some posts, these black ones out here in the landscape, if you can see that at all. And so that we have to resolve the forces. Otherwise, these posts, they have a considerable amount of load hitting the top of them if this is loaded with the top wind. Providence is right on the water. It has some pretty high wind loads, not say Hurricane Florida, but still pretty good, and
Yeah.
has snow and ice. So we have to consider all that. What's that loading doing? If this is covered, in an inch or two of ice, how much weight is that lowering it down, or how much wind load is that? And what's that max force?
Well, and I guess, yeah, you're calculating the force, so you're pulling the shade fabric as tight as possible and loading it at the same time. So that pull keeps it from moving, but then you have to put the weight on it. Yeah, no,
That
it's
pull and
beautiful though.
that's
It's like sculpture that's functional. I love the shadows as well. Adds a whole nother element to the space.
right. Yep.
I
And you
love
can
it.
see that the fabrics are all in these 3D
Yeah.
forms, and there's points that go up and points that come down, and that geometry stabilizes the fabric against the wind load. So if we have a flat
Okay.
fabric, if we put it out flat, well, it's going to catch wind like a bellowing sail. But
Yeah.
because these fabrics are pulled in tension into a shape, then the wind doesn't have that ability to deflect them as much. So that's part
Wow.
of it.
And what if you don't have space? Do you have a project where, let's say, you couldn't use posts in the ground, you had to come up with a different
Yeah,
solution or some unique solutions, I guess?
well, there's kind of almost always post in some ways, but I'll scan here and we'll go back in. So this is one in Greensville, South Carolina, and we have right
Oh,
here, if
it's attached to
we
the building in a lot of
yeah,
places,
we can
yeah.
see the building attachments. We were fortunate to be brought in pretty early, work with the different building architects and multiple different firms and engineering firms. And this is also sitting on a parking structure down here. This was a precast parking structure, and it was the only thing that was already
Oh, no.
designed and engineering or in actual fabrication when we were starting our work.
So you
And so we're
couldn't
trying to
affect
sit
it.
we're sitting post on it, but essentially those posts that are sitting there are hardly pushing down. They're almost floating on top of the thing and just resting there. It makes it easier to build, but structurally they're not really pushing their load impact because again have all of these different building anchors that are
But you had to make sure that the buildings could take the force of
right. Well,
okay,
the
so
buildings can, but the trick is sometimes how is that anchoring? Because
okay,
I've got this plate, we're going to design the plate and we're going to tell the building engineer what this load reaction is. And in some cases on this building, I think there was a load reaction up a little bit higher that was up to 100,000 pounds at most if it got like kind of hurricane force winds through the area. But the building engineer, then there's a surface where it's like, well, we're going to transfer that to the building engineer who knows their building, and they're going to figure out how to resolve that internal anchoring, or if it can. Concrete and steel buildings, these are the ones that are, pretty easy to anchor in. Wood buildings can be tricky because how do you grab enough force in that frame? You can do it still, but you might have to go in and do more modification.
okay.
And this is all easier when it's done in advance versus, like at the same time the structure is getting built.
I know, but I mean, how often can that happen? Like, you might only have one of these buildings that's being constructed at the time, or, there's always existing buildings.
This is always the challenge. We're working in a built environment and we're trying to build the next thing in the environment to adapt, to reuse, and do all that, which I think is really smart. Architecture has to do this. So, but this is why, the profession has as many intricacies as it
Yeah.
does, right?
Why
Like,
you need to involve so many people because you don't want
yeah,
to, yeah, introduce a force that damages a building in the long term,
yeah,
or short term.
yeah, totally.
Oh,
And each
that's
of these,
beautiful.
there's three buildings here, and each of them has a completely different anchoring technology. It looks the same on the outside, but but it anchors back into the building differently. So
Okay.
that's part of what
Well,
it
and this
is.
is why it's good that you have so many specialties in-house that you can, the projects that want to involve you, they don't have to know about all this. You can bring your team here to figure it out. Ooh, now what is this one?
This is another ice rink.
Oh, is it? You're specializing in ice rinks, are you?
It's just something I never expected and happened.
I wouldn't have either. Uh, I love how it's more concentrated on I don't know if this is the southern end, but the southern end is
Guessed it.
much more concentrated, and then it opens out.
It opens up and lifts up and creates some movement. And this is in Mesa, Arizona. And we have some poles close in right on the edge of the rink, and then again we're anchoring farther out into the landscape.
Yeah, and again, that's why it's an iterative process because you need to know what the whole area is what's gonna be paved, what's gonna be planting, what's the shape, the flow of people, and then
Oh,
how much, you know, how much flexibility do you have on where those posts go? I guess that's part of the process, is it?
That's part of the process. We have a good bit and we have absolute needs. We have, there's a force that's especially in this one, you see the force, it's like running through
Yeah.
these cables in the structure. Well, we have to pull this out and anchor it down in a period of time. So we chose to anchor it, as much right in here. This one spans over, but because the depth is getting shallow, so this one's anchoring it, and then we have a post here and a post over here because these we have this landscape area that's kind of also where the rainwater runoff runs, so we can just anchor a tension line down into the ground over here
Yeah.
and hold that force back because it's easier than kind of holding it across the top or taking a big bending moment because again these are large span forces.
Yeah. That is fantastic. And do you have, I don't know if this is how new the structures are, but do you have any kind of data on how much the temperature has been affected, prior to installation and after installation for these? I mean, again, I didn't know we'd be talking about ice rinks, but it gives you an idea for the heat as well.
Now that we have two built, I need to get some data during the winter, but we have plenty during
The
the
summers.
summertime where we go out and we build this and we watch. There's areas of this area down here where this yoga class is. This is a riverfront park pavilion, and there's areas that are kind of on the edge of the structure, but still part of the event space, the event slab down here, but it's always getting sun exposure, whereas our shade covers a lot of that area. And you can walk back and forth between the two through the day with it moving,
Okay.
the sun moving, and a later day it creeps in from this far side of the picture. And take a temperature meter with you and just walk through the space. And it's incredible. Even in the area that was shaded, but isn't anymore, there's a 5 degree to 7 degree difference in just the air
Wow.
temperature right there a few feet above the ground.
Now,
And
what do you attribute that to? Is it more airflow or
it's that
total
that
shade or
concrete hasn't
okay,
heated
concrete.
up. It's
Yeah,
not been in the sun all day long and then still
and
getting baked.
permeate.
It's
Yeah.
like been in the shade and then maybe the shade has moved along, but it's still not as hot as the neighboring concrete that was in the sun all day. And then we go under the shade and we see 10 to 15 degrees difference under the shade, but there's nothing holding that air in. Now, on a very windy day, it would be more constant, but often these hot days are not that breezy, right? So
They are. Yeah, yeah. I know that's when you want the
it's
breeze and you don't get
you
it.
want the breeze and you don't get it, right?
Well, and
So
in this one, so I mean, this one is so different from the others, and it looks like your structure spans a huge area, but there's not as much shade
well,
as.
this is an interesting one because this is a renovation
Okay.
structure. The larger structure is from 1974 World's Fair Pavilion
Okay.
in Spokane and was totally covered at one point. And back in 1974. So this is an early modern tension structures. Tension structures go back. Bedouin tents and American Indian. So we're dealing with a structure type that's among the first built architecture, and it's very modern. This is like technology that's 50 to 60 years old of how to calculate and shape these. So this is an early example in the US of this 300 foot across, 130-foot high tensile structure that was the primary pavilion for the World's Fair. And it stood as this icon in in Spokane, and many of the residents there remember they had an ice rink under it for a long time. So
Okay.
but it was covered, and then the covering ripped apart because this was like canvas duct wax. So it wasn't a good engineered fabric like we have today. This is the 70s. And then they'd try to put the fabric back up, it would rip again. So, and then they just left it as a framework for many years. And then the park even got abandoned, not sure of safety, etc., for the last, 5 years before this renovation, which happened 2019, this open. And so we were brought in because they wanted to put shade up, and they weren't even going to use the structure at first because they weren't sure how to. But it's like, I'm looking at the structure. You have a tensile structure here. We should
Yeah.
use it.
It was
And then it
competent
became,
still, I
yeah, well,
guess.
it became known that they didn't know how to rate the engineering of it. So we went on to rating the engineering of it, reviewing it, taking load readings of every whole lot of these
I love
cables,
that.
and kind of reverse engineering the whole thing from these amazing hand drawn 1974 drawings. And their accuracy was incredible. I mean, they designed this with, slide rules and hand drawings. Um, and but yet the variation between what they had designed and drawn on paper and what reality is of this shape over 300 feet, there was like a foot and a half difference in shape. And these nature kind of finds the forms of this. It's the principle of the physics that makes the form. We can vary the heights of the supports, but in the middle of this, to only have that variation without modern software that we use, I was pretty impressed.
That is so cool. And I mean, it stood the test of time and like you can see that it adds a lot visually. I guess I was just like, why would you build such a big structure and only shade part of it? But this makes so much
But
sense.
the city loves the structure,
Yeah,
and also the structure was built for an event. So once we actually got to looking at it, there was a max amount of fabric and shade we could actually put on the structure to
really.
stay with inside current codes because it wasn't looked at for a permanent code. And now we're moving to a permanent
Permanent code. Okay.
code condition. So we had to kind of adapt that. And there's this walkway they built up here where people can go up and look out, and you can see the two rivers wrapping through where they split, and it splits and wraps around this little island where this is in the middle of Spokane. And so they wanted the views from that, and, you know, and all of that. It was just how to protect this event space, uh, and really get that southern sun
Sun
protected for
off
that
the
event
concrete.
space where
Yeah.
they have this thing called Hoop Fest and play basketball out there all day. There's, different corporate events and weddings, and then these giant music concerts that set up there. So they really actively use this lower space a lot.
I mean, it doesn't look like you've added a lot of sail shades, but I think you have. Sorry, and I'm
Yeah,
calling them sail shades, but
oh,
yeah.
it's fine. I think there's a variety of terms that can be used.
Okay.
Um, and I think that, it does appear like a sail or a boat sail to people. So I think the sail shade is an interesting term that's just kind of happened out there in many directions. But it's like 7,000 square feet of shade
Wow. Okay.
right there.
It's just
So
the whole arena is so big, it doesn't look like a lot,
yeah,
but that is a lot. Well, and I'm seeing a lot of your just in a white color, but you can do
yeah,
other colors. Is
you
that
can. I want to go to, let's see, there we go. Let's
oh,
just look at something smaller
yeah.
in comparison. We can do a lot of what um, we we have here is not color. I don't think I have a color one up today, but
That's okay.
if you go on our website, you can see a lot of color, and there's a
Okay.
lot of color available. But in certain of the longest lasting fabrics, a lot of them are just white.
Okay.
So for the rain fabrics. You can get colors, but it's trickier to come. And there's also the fact that a lot of this is fitting in with architecture. And unless you're in an event environment or something like that, color's got to be just the right subtle thing, not to feel like too much, right?
Overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. So here, this has this particular, this is a winery here in Oregon, and it has this permanent structure which has this white canopy. It's a rainproof, holds back the snow load or ice loads, whatever we get. And then a seasonal structure, which is all of these shades for their lower patio that are up now, but go during the winter time because they might put a tent down there to have enclosed events during the winter, and you don't need the shade. So also by taking the shade down, we get this great swing season, extend it where it might still be beautiful in the fall, but we don't we want to get any sun on us, etc. that we can because the sun's going away for the year up here.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah.
and most of the projects that you've shown today are public spaces and commercial spaces. Do you also do residential, or does it tend to be mostly larger places?
Most of our work happens in the larger kind of, civic, commercial, or, you know, government, etc., park settings. And because that's really what we've gotten known for. We have done residential in the past, but in the small residential project doesn't fit the footprint because there's so much design and engineering that,
And
yeah,
cost.
we might be material efficient out there, but we wouldn't be labor efficient out there in doing
Okay.
that solution for that home. And so from an affordability, it's going to be cheaper to hire a contractor, come in and put wood slats up there, or a
Okay.
traditional roof deck and shade yourself. Um,
I just
or
think it'd
buy
be
one of
beautiful.
those shades from, like people can do it and do it well. They have to understand what they're anchoring to so they don't tear the face of their house off, etc. But
It would just look
it would be
beautiful over
beautiful.
pools, and a poolscape, I
Yeah,
guess.
we've done some poolscapes in some really nice places and things like that. So that's certainly a possibility. But most residential doesn't fit the niche, and we've fallen into this niche of like, oh, we're doing these larger spans
Larger. Yeah.
that are, this is
More of a
actually a
challenge.
pretty, yeah, a pretty small span and project for us. So and I think there's more firms out there that could approach tensile structures at this scale, maybe not with the same solutions we do, but at this scale, but that very large scale, there's not many who have a really handle on how to do that and do it artistically.
Awesome. Awesome. This is beautiful. What kind of size is this? I mean, do you know offhand, as being one of the smaller projects or
Yeah, I mean, I think this upper structure is, we're looking at the side of a building that's like 35, 40 feet, 35 feet or so on the side, I think.
okay.
And so, and it's kind of in that corner that's created up there. So this upper cover is less than 1,000 square feet, like 700 square feet or 600 square feet.
Yeah,
I
great.
think of patio area under it when we look at it. But it creates a space here for they have a couple tables up there, good serving tables up there year round,
Beautiful.
such like that. And then the lower area is much larger, several thousand square feet. I think 3 or 4 thousand square feet in the lower area that's covered with this seasonal shade.
Awesome. Well, thanks for showing us that. That was quite a variety of projects that you've showed. So
Yeah,
thanks for bringing those along. What, I mean, we had lots of questions prepared ahead of time, but I think we've delved into the projects, and I think that probably answers a lot of those questions. What what do you see for the future of GuildWorks and how you can help the built environment. And yeah, what's that look like?
Well, what I see developing is that people care more about shade. They care more about outdoor living. It's like we've realized, and in some ways, COVID, I think, created a wake up like, hey, look, let's not be trapped inside all day long. Outside, really, nature gives us that special magic of, one, healthy air, but also it, just enlivens people, right? Brings good life.
Yeah.
That's probably, why were you into landscape architecture? What drew you into landscape architecture, right? I might ask that
Yes.
question.
Yeah, spend more time. We can create spaces that draw people outside, no matter what your climate is.
That's
I
right.
think that's yeah, and I think that's what you're doing. I mean, do you see that the extreme weather that we're having, is that affecting your work at all? What do you
It's making more people aware of it also. Like, oh my goodness, we used to go out there, but now in the summer we can't, or half the time we can't. And we really need to, make this available to people who like to come here and not have them come here and have heat stroke or,
or
any
stay
form
indoors or
to
yeah,
stay indoors. How do they enjoy this space? So it's becoming a higher priority. And skin cancer awareness also, like, oh, let's keep ourselves shaded, but let's not lose access to the spaces where we like to be or create more spaces that we like to be outside. I like to think of this movement like we're trying to bring the indoors outside and the outside inside. So like trying, that movement to bring plants and landscape into the house and open the house up to natural air, but then have the extension of it outside and covered and landscape where it's like you have the cover, you have the protection. So there's, elements like being, inside, but, it's that permeability of that and on lots of different levels, whether it, I'm talking now home reference, but you can see that on a civic reference when you look at these bigger projects we've done. That's kind of
you've
doing that.
seen an impact since COVID, and do you think that I mean, there have been cultures that have been good at using the outdoor spaces for a lot longer than the US. So, does that mean that we're catching on here in the US?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I think of Norwegians, like they embrace the weather and they very far north, very inclement weather, and they are always outside. I feel like, and also, I'm from Louisiana, but I've lived in Scotland for 20 years. I don't think in Scotland we embraced the awesome weather that we had. We have a lot better weather there than they did in Norway, I think, but like we didn't embrace it in the right way. And I feel the same about the US. And in certain cities it's better, but we have pretty awesome weather around the US, and we
So that,
should be embracing it more. I think that the work that you're doing is helping that. So, but yeah, curious on your thoughts, how the US sits compared to other cultures.
well, I see it some, but of course I'm working primarily in the US. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's it. But I see it, there's a lot of just movement towards that all over the US where they're doing,
Good.
how do we make cities kind of more livable in a way and all areas more livable? And that's part of, being outside and being comfortable and being protected, I think is part of that livability movement and enjoyment, so what's there to offer us. So, and to do it in a light touch, like that's, artistic, elegant, and fit in with, as minimal materials as we can. All of that is what I like to do and see. That's what we're hoping to add to, whichever projects show up in our potential radars.
Awesome. Well, Mard, why don't you tell us your website, how to get in touch with you, and we'll also put these details in the show notes when we run the podcast. But yeah, tell the audience how they can get in touch with you.
So GuildWorks is the name of the company. That's GUILD. WORKS. So guildworks.com is the website. You can go on there. There's a lot of info about what we do. You can see engineering images, design process, fabrication process, and go into it, frequently asked questions, and there's a contact form there. You can just get in touch with us and someone will be getting back to you.
And do it early in the project.
Yes, that's really important because, yeah, we do get ones where it's like, oh, here it is. This is, we're issuing the CDs next week. I just need a shade structure. It's like, well, you don't go to an architect and say, well, can you design me a building? I'm breaking ground in 4 weeks. Like, we have some of the same process, maybe less than the building because, less intricacies, but we still
But
have
you
to
still
go
have to
through that
deal with
same
Mother Nature, and that's
and calculate
tricky.
forces and yeah, do design and engineering and drawings and prepare. So yeah, early in the process. Please.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mara. This has been fun. Thank you for
Thank
educating
you.
us on what you guys do. I love it. It's, adding a whole nother dimension to outdoor spaces as well as functionality. Your work's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, great. And we'll see you again sometime soon. Thanks,
Okay,
Mara.
sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.